Well, hello, back for another video. I guess a little bit there. There we go. A little bit better screen view. This one will be continuation from kind of off that Heinkel 111, and will include two planes. One, the French Dewoitine 520, D520, the best French fighter produced in World War II, against one of the first American planes to fight as part of Lend-Lease from the United States of Great Britain, the Curtiss P40. Specifically, this one, the E model with 650 caliber machine guns. So what is the scenario for both of these planes and how they wound up coming to go against each other? Well, in 1941, specifically June of 1941, Britain wanted to make sure that this Nazi Germany did not go into the Middle East. They were in North Africa fighting, but they did not want them to go and have an access point to get to the oil that was in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, which I think was called Persia back then, which is basically, the most important thing. So the way to stop this is to have a presence in the Mideast. And after the war, France surrendered. The side that was south, the southern part, was an Axis collaboration state called the Vichy France. The government was called that because it was based out of Vichy France. And they flew their own equipment. This plane, the Dewoitine, just kind of made its name in the 1940 war after June-ish, April, May, and made a good account for itself. It was just as good as the Me-109 and the Spitfire. A little bit slower, but maneuverability-wise, it could very maneuverable. Tight turner, can outmaneuver an Me-109. It was closer in speed to the Me-109E, and was definitely a threat to it, especially in the hands of a good pilot. Well, Germany allowed France to keep producing this so they wouldn't have to produce fighter planes for France. From what France was doing at that point, it didn't matter. They'll take these and use them, and that's the way it was going to be. But, little parts coming off there. This plane was essentially a modern fighter, which gave France a chance if they had to go and fight against somebody, namely Great Britain. Well, Britain started to get Lend-Lease aid from the United States in the form of aircraft. And one of the aircraft earliest was the Curtiss P40. They had the B model with the 250 cals on top of the cowling and the 230s in each wing, but eventually settled on this one, the Curtiss P40E with 6 wing-mounted 50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing. A little bit better engine than the other version, and actually sort of a maneuverable plane. The other plane, the P40B and C, which they were using also, was a little bit more maneuverable maybe, but this plane was much faster and capable fighter plane in the early part of the war. So the British decided that they were going to go into what was called the Levant, which would be Lebanon and Syria, and basically take it over and kick out the Vichy French forces that are in there. And what kind of led them on where they thought that they could do that was they were refueling. The Nazis, the Germans, and the Italians are refueling in their way to North Africa and stuff. And then Vichy allowed them in there to refuel. So they thought this would be an easy kind of an action that they were able to go into and just kind of overwhelm and subdue. To do this, they had a mixed force of British, Free French, Czechoslovakian, Australian, Indian, Transjordan, Assyria, and Mandatory Palestine. The Palmach. So these were Jewish fighters fighting against the Nazis and the Italians in World War II, fighting as part of the British forces. But you see everybody kind of involved in a crusade against Nazi Germany. Well, France was just trying to buy time for itself because the Free French wanted to go in and assume control of these two colonies in the Middle East, thus giving the Allies an advantage. problem was the Allies, resource-wise, were kind of skimped. The Vichy French had exactly 289 aircraft, and the British, the RAF, could muster a force of, I believe it said, I'm looking at my notes here because I did write some notes, 55 planes. A mixture of Curtiss P40s, Hawker Hurricanes, and a handful of Gloucester Gladiators. This plane was very dominant in this little battle, the battles for the Levant, as they call it, where it actually showed itself that it was a potent plane to be dealing with. The other plane, on the other side of the coin, the Dewoitine, was not some obsolete, not too great plane where you could go in and just do whatever you want with it. It had a top speed of about 350 to 355 miles an hour. It had four 7.5 millimeter machine guns, two in each wing, and firing through the nose. A Hispano Squeeza 20 millimeter cannon, a very good auto cannon. So it had the same thing that the ME-109 had. And it could climb fast. I mean, accelerate pretty good. Its engine was rather small. They were testing put bigger and larger engines, but the Germans forbade that because then you'd have a plane that was able to outfly the ME-109s and probably the Focke-Wulfs too, because this was a very light, all-metal frame. But in this battle, the French actually had aircraft that could do damage, and do damage they did. They, on the, let me see what we got here. They shot down many British Blenheim and Martin bombers that the British were using. And this plane was involved doing it. The MS-406 was involved too, but this plane was probably, on the side of the French, the most modern fighter. I don't know if the Free French flew this. I know eventually they would have them, but these Dewoitines were in the Vichy, which would have had a different tail too. Let me explain that. They would have like stripes on here. They call them slave pajamas. They're basically stripes that prisoners that went to Devil's Island wore. And that's what they would use to differentiate their planes from the Free French planes. This would have been a Free French plane. It would have had the normal French tricolor in the back on the rudder, and you know what it was, or knew what it was. So this plane here basically was doing all kind of domineering stuff in the air, while this plane was like making its baptism of fire of fighting there. The P40 did really good. They shot up on the ground and destroyed a lot. A lot of things were like kind of wasted away. And as far as plane to plane, these two planes did battle it out. How many of these were down by the P40s, I don't know. I know this plane shot down one P40, and that was shot down on July the 11th, 1941. So one Dewoitine 520 did in a Curtiss P40. So it would have been kind of like coming in for the kill. This plane could have done a lot more, but the British actually were flying pretty well. From what I'm looking alone here, most of the stuff that happened was on the ground. But after this battle was over, trying to see here, they lost a lot of aircraft, the French. Oh boy. Excuse me for a second. They lost 179 aircraft at the end of the battle when Syria and Lebanon were both occupied. The planes that remained that were there flew to Sardinia, which is an Italian island, so they could be dispersed amongst access bases throughout the Mediterranean. Probably some of them went back to France or wherever the Germans directed them to go, because they basically were flying as an Axis power, the Vichy French. But out of this action, I mean, they had some pretty substantial aces. One of them that flew this plane was Pierre Leglone. He was like France's greatest ace that shot down 18 planes. He had 18 kills. He shot many German planes before the surrender in May of 1940, but then he flew for the Vichy French. And while in service with Vichy France, he shot um, Brit- um, 5 British aircraft on June 23rd of 1941. So, I mean, he was a good pilot and he did a lot to cause havoc amongst the Brits in North Africa also. Just a side note, he wound up going to fight for the Free French and he died while trying to learn how to fly an American Lockheed P-38 Lightning. But that's neither here nor there. What's here is American aircraft being used now before our entry into the war, in the war against the Germans and Italians and the other Axis powers. And what you're seeing is that our aircraft are pretty good. The Curtiss P40 was a pretty, not a tight maneuvering plane, but it was a hit and run boom and zoomer. Go up high, come down fast, shoot, climb, and make another pass doing what you just did. And that was the strength of the P40. The P40 started off the P36, which is a radial engine, and then they added the Allison V1710 engine, which you see in here, and it became a pretty good liquid cooled interceptor fighter. And the inline engine made it a lot faster than its initial form, as it was in the P36. But these were available, and they did serve, and they served in the Levant, and they did pretty well. They from 200 and whatever it is, 89 aircraft, to losing 110 of them. I mean, P40 and the Hawker Hurricanes did pretty well against their opponents, who wound up fleeing from them when all the land battles yielded the land to the British and the Allies. Oh, what else can I say about this? This plane, probably in a close dogfight, the Dewoitine would come up on top because of its lightweight and because of its turning abilities. It could turn really good. The French that knew how to fly were actually good pilots in this plane. P40, on the other hand, as you know from early Pacific stuff against the Japanese that had maneuverable planes, if you try to go and turn and do a tight turn, it's not going to do it. It'll be lazily flopping about. Somebody would turn underneath you and shoot you down. So you were limited as far as that. But if you use the strengths of the P40, which the British did here, it's a devastating aircraft. And it survived the whole war. It was upgraded, a little bit better engines and things. But from the early war, the E model, this one was not a bad one. Top speed of 362 miles an hour, and it worked well below 15,000 feet. It was a low to medium because all it had was a single stage supercharger, so did not do good at altitude. In fact, started losing speed. So if you use it for where it was strongest, it was a really durable and agile and pretty devastating fighter plane. The Dewoitine was limited because the Germans did not allow the French to put a bigger engine in it, upgrade the armament, and do other things that have made this plane a potential threat to them. These planes were produced by France after the armistice, and they were sent to like Romania, allies of Nazis that were going to go to fight in the Soviet Union. So these planes were sent over to fight there. I think they did pretty well because these pilots are pretty good. And the Russian planes, the early ones, were not that great, and the pilots are pretty crappy. So a Axis pilot that knew this plane and was comfortable with it and its handling capabilities and stuff could do pretty well against the Soviets. But as far as upgrading this plane beyond from what you see here, it never happened. And it was kind of a shame. It could have been into a very more famous, more well-known World War II warbird, and it's kind of doing it now because more information is coming out about it. And as you saw, the French were just kind of like bad in producing. They should have been producing these a lot sooner, and if they had more of these with trained pilots flying in them, they might have not gotten knocked off by the Germans in 1940. They might have stood their ground and with help of the British start pushing them back. That's quite possible because they did have numbers of armor, tanks, and like I said, this thing, but it did come kind of too late. So, Operation Exporter, the invasion of Syria and Lebanon, wound up being a victory for the Allies. The Free French wound up moving their stuff into Syria and Lebanon, and the Free French were an ally against Nazi Germany and Vichy France and Italy and Bulgaria and whatever other countries were teaming up with Germany. And this was a victory, a pretty good victory. It established a secure position in the Mideast, so the oil would basically be protected. And there's no way that Germany was going to come through Egypt into the Middle East and then just take all the oil up there. There'd have been defensive positions, thanks that both Syria and Lebanon were back in control of the actual government of France, which would be the Free French. And so from there, the war would go into the Western Desert for the next place as far as Allied aircraft. And there you would see Spitfires, Hurricanes against ME-109Es and Fs, maybe Heinkel bombers, Dornier bombers, Ju-88s, mixed bag. And from that, I will end because I can hear my dog starting to bark, and I am waiting for the MiG-21 to come here. And I am going to do another video just showing a few little things, and I'm going to mention, not a sponsor so much, it's just somebody that I'm kind of aligned with because a lot of my Kobe models come from them. It's called The Corner Store. I'll show you this. I'll put a little thing so you can see it, and hopefully if you want to buy a Kobe plane, you might be able to buy them from him. He's got very reasonable prices and a good stock and extremely nice person to do business with. But I will bring the details in my next video. But for now, that was kind of weird that I did that, but I'm just playing with this computer. So everybody can see my American Eagle shirt. I will see everybody next couple of days. And hopefully these days are good, and hopefully you like my little video. And if you're going to go look to buy a Kobe model, the Dewoitine is still available. It's a nice plane. It's a good build. See you in a couple of days, and have a good day, everybody.